Okay, good afternoon and welcome to Yeshiva YouTube Table and Able. Today we're starting a new set of halachos, Hilchos Birchos HaPeiros, or more commonly referred to as Birchos Hanenin. This is the seventh parak of Maseches Brachos discusses this topic, and it's probably people's one of the most enjoyable halachos to learn because it talks about food, and who doesn't like a good food? But it also talks about fruits and vegetables, and who really likes fruits and vegetables? Come on. Vegetables for sure not. Fruits. Some people claim to like fruits, but the only fruit that's decent is a banana. Maybe trying circumstances an apple. Otherwise, fruits don't taste too good. You got to combine it with other stuff, right? Vegetables are good in combination to be served with different types of meats and things like that. Dinner foods or pastas and sauces and things like that. Um, and 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 fruits are good when mixed with certain ingredients for a good dessert, a good drink by themselves. Who eats fruits and vegetables? So with that said, let's find out about what bracha you make when you eat fruits and vegetables. Reish Beis 202 Dine Birchos Peiros Ha'ilon, starting with actual fruits. Generally, people will call fruits things that come from a tree. Aleph, I'll call peras the ilan of arach v'tchila borei praetz. Anything that's the fruit of a tree, you say borei praetz. We'll see if you eat the actual fruit when it's ripe. Chutz ma'yayin, except for wine, which is not exactly the fruit, which is something that comes made from the fruit, grape juice or wine fermented. Mevarach lav borei pri agafen. Everyone knows you make a special bracha for wine and grape juice. Bein chai v'in mevushal. Whether the wine is cooked or whether then it's not cooked, right? It's obviously better quality when it's not cooked. Doesn't make a difference. You say, Bori Pragav, and Menju also Contidon, even if it's mixed with other things. I know Shnostin Bo Dvash Bilpulin, take wine, put some honey in there, you put some peppers in there. Because these things are tafel to the wine, they're subordinate, even if they maybe constitute the rove, but they're meant to spice up the wine, not necessarily, right? You think of there's different types of drinks that you spice up, different types of wines. You put different flavorings. The famous Bartanura that everyone drinks, has, I think, some different flavorings they put in there, some peach flavoring or something like that. So you have these things. So you still make a bar agafa and hagav in this arav yayin b'sheichar. Let's say you mixed beer and wine together. As you go after what most of the drink is composed of. Marov yayin. If most of the drink is made up of wine, mavarach bar agafa. Marov sheichar, mavarach shahakol. Sheichar is beer. Beer you make a shahakol on. We'll talk more about that at a different time. So again, whenever you have a mixture, whether it's food or drinks, you always go after the rov usually. If both things are made for tasting, so you go after the major ingredient. It's very easy. If you look at the ingredients of a drink or whatever, then you're not sure what bracha to make, you go after what the rov is. Beis haboser is talking about an unripe grape. It's not big enough to be the size of a white bean. It's too small. It's a small, puny little grape. You don't say borei pri'aetz, you say borei pri'adama. Now the reason you say borei pri'adama because it grows from the ground. However, it's not called borei pri'aetz. Borei pri'aetz is a fruit, and the fruit is only when it's ripe. When it's that size, that's considered a fruit, and you would say borei pri'aetz. We talk shalom udalanu shir pol alav, and the Shulchan Aruch says, however, we don't know exactly what the shear, the size of a white bean is. If you go to the store and you want to buy some cholent beans, some of them are white. Those cholent beans, we don't know if that's the white bean that the Mishnayos talk about. Olam until it looks like a normal grape. You don't have to measure the grapes. If they sell a cluster of grapes and they look like grapes, even if some of them look a little smaller, it's probably okay to make bar praetz. This is only by grapes. However, by other trees, Shulchan Aruch rules, no matter how small the fruit is, a tiny little orange, you make bar praetz. Provided that it's edible. Even if it's edible, meaning you have nothing else to eat, you'd eat it, right? You still make borei praetz, unless it's completely inedible. Then you wouldn't make a bracha on it. You don't make a bracha on something which is not edible. Haga, it's like eating dirt. The Ramah says, also by carobs, also, they have to have you ever seen carobs, we just had Tu B'Shvat. When I was growing up, they gave out carobs. Um, somehow, Shimon Bar Yochai survived on carobs for 12 years. I don't know. When I was younger, I was trying to bite those carobs. You break your teeth on them. I don't know how many teeth Shimon Bar Yochai had left. Um, it has to be, in order to make a bracha borei praise, it has to be like, I guess they grow on like sort of like chains, one attached to the next one. It looks like that, then you make borei praise. If it's not that, it's not ripe yet, you make borei praise. Same thing by olives. It has to be an olive tree. It has around the place, the top of the olive, there's some leaves growing on. It has to have that leaves on top. But if it's not that big, this is the halacha. This machlokes is centered really around Mishnayos and Maseches Maisros, I believe, which talk about when is a fruit considered ready to be onas hamaisros, where you have to go shumas hamaisros already. It's highly questionable to relate them to Hilchos Brachos, but that's for a different time. Gimel Garine Aperos. Again, we probably accept the halacha of the Ramah. These three things are different. Other things, once they grow a little bit, it's Gimel Garine Aperos. Let's say you have seeds. You cut open a fruit, you took the seeds out. Apple seeds. Hey, masukim, if they're sweet. Apple seeds are not sweet, I don't think. Then you make borei praetz. According to the Shulchan Aruch, he considers seeds to be a main part of the pri, right? We're going to learn that only the pri itself actually gets borei praetz. Things like the shell, or the garin, or the seed, those are not actually part of the fruit. They're subsidiary to the fruit, so you make borei praedama. However, the Shulchan Aruch holds that the seeds are actually part of the fruit. If they're bitter, that no one would eat them, so there's no bracha. Or if they're very bitter, you would never eat them, but by burning them in fire, right? You sweeten them up, then you turn them into shahakal, because essentially there's no bracha, and by changing it through the fire, you're just making it edible, but it completely lost its status as edible food by itself, because you can't eat it, so therefore you'll make shahakal. Daled, shemen zayis, im shaso, k'moshehu, eno mavarach alav klal. Let's say instead of like Neros Chanukah, you took your Shemen Zayis and you wanted to drink it. Talking about Neros Chanukah, because a lot of people now they use Shemen Zayis as edible, right? If you use Shemen Zayis as not edible, you wouldn't make a bracha on that, because it's not. If you read on the bottle, it says don't eat it. It's not purified enough to eat. Shemen Zayis im shaso k'moshehu eno mavarach alav klal. Olive oil is very expensive. It actually is very good in salads. So if you drank it as a drink, you don't make a bracha. Mishum dazuki maski, like to drink it by itself as a salad dressing, it's good, but drinking by itself, it causes you pain, so you don't make a bracha. Machalo impas. Let's say you smeared a little bit on your bread to make it not so dry. Eno mavarach alav the pasik, or even though it adds to the bread's taste, nonetheless the bread is the main part. We're going to learn about ikar and tafel. If you have something that is subordinate to something else, for example, you're eating herring with a cracker or something like that, or a kichel, right? You make a bracha on the herring, not on the kichel, because that's what you're eating. You're just eating the kichel to make it taste a little better. Same thing over here. Mshasal ma'orav imei silka. Let's say you mix the olive oil. Mei silka is basically beet juice, or soup you make out of borscht. If you know what borscht is basically soup that's made out of beets. So you put a little olive oil in there. Hanika nigron, jazen omazik. Now, if the Shemen Zayis is going to add to the taste, it actually helps out your palate. So if he has a soreness in his throat, Havale Shemen Ikar, the Shemen is the main part. The oil is the main part, because you're eating the borscht, right, as for medicinal purposes, to heal your throat, make your throat a little smoother. So you'd say a bracha on Shemen Zayis. You would actually make borei praetz. No, it's a drink, right? But the main part of Zaysim is actually they're only by Zaysim Anavim we say they're actual liquids that come from it are considered significant enough to make their own brachas. Otherwise, we're going to see that liquids that come from oranges, apples, you only make shahakal. The animal is kavan the refuah. If he's not mechavan the refuah, el lachila, he wants to eat the borscht, right? Havalei on nigron nikar, the borscht is nikar. Eno varach el on nigron shahakal. You make a bracha on the nigron, because that's most of the borscht is beets, not shemen zayis. So therefore it's the rov, and therefore you make a bracha on that. Hey, shkedem hamarim. Let's say you have almonds that are bitter. Now the almonds we have, I don't think they're called bitter. The almonds that we have, that's not what the Shulchan Aruch is talking about. The Gemara in Chulin does talk about Gemara Chulin does talk about almonds that are sweet, but here he talks about almonds that are sweet. Obviously, when they're very small, they taste bitter. When they're bigger, they taste sweet. So you make a bracha when they're bigger. Slicha. אני אתן שיר, אפשר... Shkedim amarim, kshem tanim, when they're small, when they're bitter, kshem tanim, when they're small, mavarech bori pra'etz. When they're small, you make bori pra'etz. The reason you make bori pra'etz is actually when the bitter almonds, they're not edible, the actual fruit itself, but the peel is edible. And when you eat them when they're small, you're eating it for the peel. And the peel, according to the Shulchan Aruch, just like the garin, even though a lot of poskim argue on this Shulchan Aruch on this, but he holds the peel is considered ikar. You make bori pra'etz on the peel. Gedolim v'lo klum. If they're big, so you're eating it for the actual almond itself, and it's bitter, it's inedible, so you don't make a bracha. The zuke maske, it hurts you. The time of the milsa, shem tan mikra chilasim hiaklipa bein amara. Right, the main part of eating it is for the shell, the peel, and that's not bitter. Shem dolim mikra chilasim hashvifnim. Right, bigger almonds you don't eat for the peel, you eat it for the almond itself. V'hu mar, it's very bitter. You're not going to eat it. This is an interesting halacha that if you're able to sweeten up these almonds, you change their bracha from no bracha to bori pra'etz, which is interesting because we learned before that when it comes to the seeds, right, if the seed is inedible, right, and you sweetened it by cooking it in fire, right, cooking it over the fire, roasting it or something like that, so then you only make shach on the abedvaro. Here he says you make bori pra'etz. The answer is that it's actually a big question that the post can deal with over here. It seems to be that even though the Shulchan Aruch holds that the garin is part of the ikar apri, enough to make bori pra'etz by itself if it tastes good. However, it is still subsidiary, even though it's called ikar apri, it's still subsidiary to the main part of the pri. So here we're talking about the almonds, which is the pri atzmo, right? Shulchan doesn't disagree that there's a pri itself, and then there's something which is also part of the pri. He holds garin are also part of the pri, but they're still subordinate to the actual pri itself. So therefore, if they're inedible and you sweeten them by roasting them, you only make shahak. However, here we're talking about the almond itself, and therefore if you turn it back into an edible, you'd make bori pra'etz. Vav salaf, here shalaf min ilan sha'alin shalom ru'in la'achila v'yesh ba'alav k'min tmarim of yonos hu apri me'atzlaf ha'kafrizin and klipa shesvaviv apri klibos ha'gozim. If you've learned Maseches Brachos, it talks about this interesting tree called salaf, and if you use the art scroll, which I'm sure you did, it talks about, it identifies the salaf as a caper bush. Now, I don't know if people have ever experienced what a caper bush is. I certainly haven't. Maybe I have. I don't know. I don't remember ever eating a caper bush. I would like to suggest that salaf is strawberries. So what this salaf has, let's just take the article's definition. You have a tree. You have leaves on the tree, and you also have, dates. A lot of, berries have a lot of fruit trees have like berries, growing on the tree besides the actual fruit. And then you have the fruit itself, and you have the shell or the covering of the fruit, the skin of the fruit. So al in val tamaros, the leaves and the tamaros themselves, the berries, al hakafrisa, and also on the peels, bori priyadam, and then you make bori priyadam. And al yonos shem ikra pri bori pra'etz, on the actual fruit itself, the caper bush, the fruit, the evyonos, I don't know what they are. You make bori pra'etz. The reason I feel it's strawberries is because strawberries, if you look at them carefully, they have, it's actually very different strawberries than any other fruit. Obviously they have leaves on top. A strawberry, you have to cut it. That's why a lot of bugs, strawberries have problems with bugs because they have those leaves on top. It's like red parts and black parts also, and the actual fruit is very different than the actual the red and the black parts are very different things. So I think that's really what salaf is. And the berries, is like the black part, and I think the fruit is the red part. Anyway, but again, listen, I'm not here to give a new halacha. You can rely on the art scroll, and when you find your caper bush, you can know which brachas to make. Zayin tamarim shemiachan bayad, v'asa mehem isa. Let's say you took dates, right, which one of the zayin aminim, and you crush them up, right? V'asa mehem isa, v'hotzi mehem garinim. You want to crush dates up, you want to make a cake out of it or something like that. You took out the seeds. Afilu hachi lo nishanas berachasam. Even so, the bracha has not changed. If you make a cake and you squash up dates. It actually is not so bad. I just tasted. We had challah on Shabbos. I went to someone's house. They served challah. It looked like there was raisins in the challah, but no, it wasn't raisins. To uh, my happiness, I was very happy that it actually turned out to be dates. It actually didn't taste so bad. You could squash up dates. Dates actually taste pretty good. The real dvash in the Torah, the real honey in the Torah. Eretz Zeis Tev Shem Zavas Chalav Dvash, right? Dvash is not dvash bee honey. It's milk and honey of dates, right? Dvash in the Zayin Aminim, it refers to dates. It doesn't say tamarim. That's one of the Zayin Aminim. It says dvash. Eretz Zeis Sheminu Dvash. Dvash is dvash tamarim. So the real honey in the Torah is not bees honey. That's why on Rosh Hashanah, I supposed to dip the apple in the honey. What honey are you talking about? We're not talking about honey from bees. We're talking about date honey. That's why everyone has a problem, because one of the simanim is dates. And you have dates and you have apples, and everyone's like, no, first make the bracha on the apple. No, you can't make the bracha on the apple. The real Amdanim say, because you have one of the Zayin Aminim, you have dates over here. The answer is no. You don't have dates over there. You have honey made out of dates, and therefore you make a bracha on the apple, which is ikr, and what you dip it in is tafel. But you can still say both he rotzons, because he rotzon on the honey, and he rotzon on the apple. But the apple comes first. You're not making a bracha on the dates because it's the honey. People don't realize that. I tell you secrets over here. So, so even though it's squashed up, nonetheless, it doesn't lose its bracha, because we're going to see that it's recognizable. You could recognize it. You look at it, a paste made out of dates. You'd say, hey, that's date paste. So that's okay. And you still make bar praetz, and main shalosh is after the zayin minim. If you eat a kazayis of the zayin minim, you have to make a main shalosh also. Like if you eat, cookies or something. Hagel fiza huadin belavarin hanikra pavalida, which is basically jam. And marakalan bori praetz. If you have jam, right, made out of strawberries, you make bori praetz. V'yesh omrim levarach aleim shakol. Some say no. If you're spreading some jam. You're just eating jam on crackers by itself, well, that would be ikar v'tafel. But if you're eating jam by itself, you make shahakol. It's machlokes by jam. You make shahakol. Avalim birech bor praetz yatsa kanerali ikar. However, if you made bor praetz, now what are we talking about? So the post comes here. We're talking about where you can still see a lot of the difference between what is it called, jam and jelly, right? Jelly, yeah. Peanut butter and jelly, right? You have jelly and jam. During the jam and jelly, jam you can see parts of the actual strawberries. Jelly you can't see anything. It's a complete paste. So I believe the halacha is if you can't see anything, then you make shahakal because it's not recognizable. However, if you can see part of the strawberry and you would know this comes from strawberry, then you'd make kaborak ra'etz. And the same thing with dates. Also, even though shahakal didn't indicate, there has to be some part of the dates in there so you'd recognize it as date paste. Like when I ate the challah and had dates in there that were mashed up, I had no idea it was dates. I thought it was raisins. So I will talk in Ian to lean on why it's so important to be able to recognize what the fruit is in order to make the bracha of Bar Breitz. Now we're not talking about the actual cake made out of a paste made out of the crushed up dates. We're talking about there's liquid. Actually, honey, you squeeze dates, honey will come out of it. A liquid will come out of it. You make shahakal. The only two fruits that on the juice that comes out of it, then you make a special bracha is olive oil and grapes. Grapes have bari priagafen. And zaysim, in a certain circumstance, where you're eating it for refuah, that's the only case, right? You have borscht and you have some olive oil in there for refuah, then you'd make a bari priah. There's no special bracha, there's no bari priazayas. Ted sofei hanovim, even like more discusses that. Ted sofei hanovim, shein bashan la'olam, mechein al anovlos. Let's say you have grapes that grow at the end of the season, right? There's a season for growing grapes. Some of them sprout very late. Shemus bashan la'olam. They never actually become ripe. V'chein al anovlos, shemus tamarim shebishlam b'sar f'machom v'yavshel. Let's say you have dates that were left out too long in the sun, and they dried up, right? They shriveled. Mevarach shahakol, you make shahakol again, because it's not considered ripe, right? It has to be ripe. Ripe is a good fruit. If it's not ripe, since it has a taste, it's not completely inedible, so you make shahakol, but it's not called pri unless it's ripe. Yud, Perosh Shishran, this is overripe over here. Yud, Perosh Shishran al Bishlan Bamayim. Let's say you took fruits and you soak them or you cook them in water. You cook them in hot water. Al Bishnichnas Tama Pri Bamayim, Eno Varachos Bamayim. It's like a fruit soup or something like that. El shakol, the bracha, the correct bracha, make a shahakol. La Rosh kasa the efshar shem nichlas tam al pri b'mayim avorach bor pri. Even though the Rosh agrees that if you squeeze out oranges out of orange juice, you only make a bracha on the orange juice shahakol, right? However, when you take an orange and you cook it in water, and that water gets the taste of orange juice, of the orange. Obviously, you took the orange out after you cooked it, and you have a liquid water that was mixed with this juice that came from the orange. According to the Rosh, he says you make borei pra'etz because at least there, the real taste of the orange is in that water. It's hard for me to believe this is true because the actual juice, you take an orange, you squeeze it out, that's really the juice. To say you mixed it with water, it's diluted in that case. Hard for me to understand the Rosh's opinion, but this Rosh is, the Shulchan Aruch is choshesh for this Rosh, and we'll see in a second what the nafkamina is. So, obviously this is a nafkamina. But another nafkamina is Yud Aleph, Mishriyas Smukim Muta'enim, Al Maybe Shulam, Mevarach Lem Shahakol. Let's say you took raisins, which are dried out grapes, or Ta'enim, or figs, and you cooked them, or you soaked them in water, Yotze, Mevarach Lem Shahakol, and the Bracha Rishona, you can make Shahakol. Yotze Gam La Rosh. Meaning, because the Iker halach, even though the Shulchan Aruch is choshesh for the Rosh, in a case where you did this, b'di'evet, right? Maybe you should try not to do it, but you're allowed to do it. I mean, if you like it like that and you're allowed to do it, it's just shas If you enjoy eating a certain food, right, it's shas for you. I mean, what? You have to starve yourself? If you like certain foods, that's shas. I'm sorry, this is not. You won't say eat things you don't like. It's a need. It's a need to eat foods that you want, not that you want, that you enjoy. It's a need to eat foods that you enjoy. If you have foods that you enjoy, foods that you don't enjoy, it's not a want to eat what you enjoy. What you enjoy, if you know what you enjoy, most people don't know what they enjoy. Yodze gam harush. You yodze for also the rush. Aval bracha shalacharayim. The problem is the bracha achrona. Yesh te'sta'ak. I can varach more nefashos. Or varach bracha achas mein shalosh ka rush. The problem is the bracha rishona is no problem because even b'di'eved the rush says that even if technically the bracha happens to be borei pra'etz, you made shahakol your yotzer. We're going to learn shahakol patters everything b'di'eved. However, borei nefashos does not exempt. If you're really chayiv to say main shalosh, say ala michya or ala peiros, and you said borei nefashos, doesn't exempt it. So here we have to be choshesh for the rush. You shouldn't, if you cooked figs or you cooked raisins, which are grapes, which is basically the suffix, but these are zayin aminim, so it might have to say ala peiros. So you shouldn't only eat it. You should only drink these things or serve it as a soup in a meal, where the Birkas Hamazon exempts you at the end. Oh, yocha pri mishiva minim. The gam yishtamayim. Or you should just, right? Some people do it at the end of the meals when they're not sure about dessert. They bring out a different type of food for all the different brachos. So here also, bring out some water, drink some water, and drink, something, and eat a fruit that's from Shivas Aminim. So you have to make both brachos, and then you could eat it. Let's say you have the grapes, and you had water that you soaked the raisins in, and you extracted them from the actual grapes. Meaning, if included in the water, you actually squeezed out the raisins. It wasn't just that you cooked them or soaked them. It was actually you squeezed them out. So that includes wine. That's what wine is. Wine is basically squashed up grapes, right? It has to be the raisins that are moist enough that if you would step on them, a little bit of moisture would come out. However, if you would step on them, you squash them together and no juice would come out, that's not going to be a case of yayin anymore, and whatever came out of them would probably be shahakol. Yud beis kol peiros shetovim chayim uvusholim. Let's say you have fruits. Certain fruits you could eat, you only want to eat it raw. Some you want to eat them cooked. So if they're eaten sometimes raw and sometimes cooked, you go into tapulka ma'agasim. Sometimes apples could be eaten. Most people eat apples raw. Sometimes you actually cook apples. I think it's pretty disgusting when you cook apples. Agasim, or pears. If you have those cooked apples, what are they called? I forgot what they're called. People serve them for dessert, I think. you make borei pri eitz. If the only way is to eat them cooked, if you ate them when they're raw, you make shahakol, because the Gemara says a halacha that it depends. When people plant the tree, they plant it for the fruit to be used in certain circumstances. In certain circumstances, certain fruits are only eaten when they're cooked, and certain fruits are only when they're raw. So therefore, if you eat it in the fashion that wasn't meant to be planted in the tree, so then it's not called a pri in that instance, and you make shahakol because they're still edible. Shehem mivushalim bar praetz, and when they're cooked, then you make bar praetz, because that's what they meant. The person who planted the tree meant they should eat it like it. Yod Gimel egos gomer. Let's say you have a nut. Hamatuka medvash v'nikra noyido. I don't know what it is. Lomar noyit. Okay, I wish I knew these words. Where are these words from? These Spanish words, I guess. Shulchan Aruch live in Spain. So if you had a nut that, think about almonds, glazed almonds or something like that, because the fact that you cook them in honey, and maybe the honey is shahakol, nonetheless, that's tafel to the actual nut itself, and you make bar based on the nut. On all nuts you make ha'etz, they're all converted except peanuts, you make hadama. Just quick fact to know. Yodalad, egos rach shemavashim medvash rekorin lo nus mushkada. Let's say you have a very soft, unripe type of nut, right? That you also would cook it in honey. The reason you make shahakol is not ripe yet. Right? Again, you have nuts when they're still green, right? You cook them in honey, they're not ripe yet. The fact that you made it edible by adding honey is not significant over here, because we go after the pri itself and it's not edible, it's not ripe yet. You have sugar, you want to take sugar, you make a shahakol. If you take even a sugar cane, you take the actual cane, the plant, and you put your mouth around it and you squeeze some, moisture out of it, you make shahakol. Because again, on the plant itself, you make the bracha, the correct bracha will be bori pri adama, probably on the canes, but the actual stuff that comes out from it is shahakol, because it's nishtana, it changed, or you want to say it's like zeya, it's like liquid that comes out of it. So therefore the bracha is shahakol. Ted zayin, al pilpul v'zan b'yiveshim. You have spices, right? There's moist spices and there's dry spices. You've ever cooked, right? Most spices come, dry. So let's say you have black pepper, red pepper, the zang b'yiveshim, and ginger, right? Dried v'ala kalava shal garipla rotzalomar naglich. He says siporin, the stuff used for basamim or something like that. We'll use that. They're just used as spices in the pot. You don't make any bracha on them because no one would ever eat them by themselves. You only eat them and mix with other foods. And when they're mixed with other foods, they're subordinate to the food. It's ikar v'tafel, you want to make a bracha. Yitzayel, egos mushkat, bori priya eitz. Egos mushkat, what is egos mushkat? Not exactly sure what it is. It's a type of nut. You make bori priya eitz. Valkinila, this is cinnamon, bori priya adama, you make bori priya adama. The reason you make bori priya adama is because it grows from the ground. Cinnamon does not grow from a tree, just like sugar cane goes from the ground. It also grows from the ground. However, a mushkat, you make bori priya eitz. I don't exactly know what mushkat is. Apparently, it's something you use in order to help you go to the bathroom. Or, I'm sorry, it helps you not go to the bathroom. You have a problem going with diarrhea. It helps you stop you up. That's why you eat it. Still, even though you're eating for medicinal purposes, you enjoy it, like we saw by olive oil. Even though you eat it to make your throat smoother, still, if you're enjoying it, you make the bracha. Yudchet. Al pilpel v'zangbil k'shehem retuvim. Let's say you have moist spices, right? Actual bell peppers, or you have ginger that's actually, not dried out. When they're moist, bori pri adama, you make bori pri adama because you eat these things. Hagal kol ha'peiros sheyodea behem she'ikar ha'pri. Any fruit that you know that it's the main part of the pri. According, we learned according to Shulchan Aruch, even the seeds and even the peels are really bori pri eitz. She'eno ikar ha'pri bori pri adama. Things which are not ikar ha'pri. Right, so this is a discussion. It's a big machlokes among the poskim. According to the Vilna Gaon, I'll mention this. The Mishnah Berurah mentioned this, and see the Mishnah Berurah holds like the Vilna Gaon, that things that are like the seeds and the peels are not considered ikar ha'pri, even though Shulchan Aruch holds they are, and you would make bori pri adama, not bori pri eitz. And this, I think, is the way the Ramah holds. You're not sure if it's actual main part of the food or not, Bori Pri Adama, then you make Bori Pri Adama, because Bidi Eved, Bori Pri Adama covers Bori Breis. If you don't know what you have in front of you, even though the Gemara says you're supposed to go run to a Chacham, right? If it's not readily accessible to you, there's no one on your speed dial, or there's no one available right now for the next 10 minutes, and you want to eat something, again, you don't have to go run to a Rav. If you have a Rav right next to you, you should ask someone, but to go run across town, I don't think you have to do it before you make a bracha, and that's what the Ramah says here. You make a shahakal if you don't know. That's the halacha. If you don't know, make a shahakal. You don't have to run across town. You don't have to go searching on the phone for someone. If you know a rabbi is available on the phone, there's a hotline or something like that, you get a quick answer, so call it by all means. But if it's any difficulty involved, Hashem wants you to eat the thing, so make a shahakal because you're Yosef with shahakal. But you have it. Hope you enjoyed today's share. It's a long one. Stay tuned for Ian and Talina, where I talk about why it's important to know exactly what you're eating and how it affects the bracha. Ian and Talina coming up next.